Yumeri is a very hard-working woman who is about to get married. Because she is so dedicated, she is practically organizing her wedding by herself. She even bought the engagement ring herself. Her boyfriend, on the other hand, takes any excuse to cheat on her. But one day, when she was taking her things to her future home, she found an earring that wasn't hers. After checking the bed, she found a very long hair that wasn't hers either. After doing her research, she confronts her boyfriend. He pretends not to know anything and makes up all kinds of excuses, but Mary already knew the truth. In the end, Cucaracho apologizes and says it was a mistake that he will never make again. Mary loved him very much, so she asked to check his phone in order to forgive him. But Cucaracho preferred to break it rather than show it. This makes everything clear for Mary, so she throws her coffee in his face and tells him it's over. Later, we learn that Mary and Cucaracho were already legally married. The only thing missing was the wedding ceremony, but since he had been unfaithful, they had to get divorced. Mary was very sad because she was the one who lost the most with this marriage. Her mother lent them money to buy an apartment, and now she doesn't know how to tell her that she got divorced. El Cucaracho, meanwhile, was thrilled. He was now with his lover and planning to leave. As for her, she didn't even have a dog to keep her company, so she just goes to hit balls until she cries. Months later, we meet Kim Won-ju. He is the heir to the largest bakery in the country. They have been #1 for over 40 years, and it is expected that Won-ju or his cousin will be the next heir. For her part, Mary hadn't filed her divorce papers, so she was still legally married. That day, the police knocked on her door. Apparently, the person who sold them the apartment was a scammer. Does that mean she lost the money her mother lent her? Desperate, she calls Cucaracho for help, as she has no one else in the city. But he tells her that now that they're separated, it's no longer his problem and she should handle it on her own, since there's nothing else he can do. She starts drinking and suddenly her mother calls her. Her mother wanted to bring food to her in-laws, but Mary tells her not to do it, at least not for now. Then, while she's staggering home, she's hit by a car. The driver was Won-ju, who tries to help her and wants to give her money so she won't report him. But Mary misunderstands and hearing his name, thinks it's her ex-husband. So she starts hitting him. Won-ju is confused and just wants to leave. But Mary gets into his car and tells him she won't leave until he gives her the money her mother lent him. After struggling, Won-ju manages to get her out of the car, but since she was drunk, Mary sits on a cactus. When she realizes it, she starts to cry. As a result, Won-ju must take her to the hospital when they remove the thorns. She wants to leave because staying in the hospital was expensive and she currently has no money. Because of that, Won-ju decides to help her again and takes her to his house. On the way, he tells her that she reeks of alcohol and that she shouldn't talk to him anymore. When the sun rises, they pause to watch. Mary then decides not to give up and promises to overcome the problem, no matter what. Later, we see that there was a huge contest. A construction company would give away one of its best houses, worth millions of dollars. But all of this was just a front to give the house to the mayor's son and get some special favors in return. However, when it was time to draw the ticket, the chief executive officer of the company made a mistake and accidentally took Mary's ticket, since she had folded it exactly the same way the chief executive officer had. That's why he got confused and grabbed hers. That's how Mary became the winner of a beautiful house, but there was a small detail. The raffle was for newlyweds and Mary was about to get divorced. But since she needed a lot of money, she decided not to submit her divorce papers and keep the house to sell it later. But since the prize was meant for the mayor's son, the man now has to fix the chief executive officer's mistake and look for any excuse to take the prize away from Mary. He tells her that she must go with her husband, or else they will take the prize away from her. But the jerk wasn't even in the country. Mary tries to contact him, but he simply doesn't answer her. Suddenly, she remembers the stranger who helped her. He shares her husband's name, so she asks him to pretend to be her husband for a day. He asks why, but Mary doesn't want to tell him because she's afraid he'll ask for half, so instead, Won-ju agrees. And when Mary gives him the details, he thinks she's using him to scam her real husband. He tells her he'll go, but only to ruin her plans. Meanwhile, we see that the president had replaced her grandson with Won-ju since he had done such a poor job that sales had dropped. The boy's mother was against it and thinks that the president is against her son. Then we see that Won Yu calls her friend the doctor. She was very worried, in love with him, and gave him many signs, but he never noticed. At night, the landlady wanted to kick Mary out of her apartment. Since she couldn't pay, she had to leave. The next day, Won Yu starts at the company as the new marketing manager. Since there was a war to see who would be the next successor, his cousin left everything in chaos so that Won Yu would have problems. Right from the start, the company responsible for the designs and packaging was owned by Mary, Won Yu's cousin. He called her to tell her that her packaging would be worth a lot and that she should charge 10 times more for them. Because of this, Won Yu has to meet with her to negotiate. Mary was very worried because without her husband, she wouldn't get the $5 million house. For her part, Mary's ex-mother-in-law was very happy that her son had broken up with her. Since she supposedly was never fully convinced by her, she always thought she wasn't good enough for her handsome son. Besides, her son's new girlfriend was rich and could give him the life he deserves. That's why the guy even quit his job. Later, Mary arrives at her ex-mother-in-law's house and tells her that she urgently needs her son. The lady treats her very badly and tells her that her son was always too much for her, since he studied at good schools. And she's just a girl from the countryside who didn't even finish her degree. When she hears this, Mary is hurt but also relieved since the lady is no longer her mother-in-law. Before leaving, she asks her to pretend they never met. Later, she meets with the marketing team. Won Yu is there, ready to offer her a good deal. But before going in, Mary sees him and can't believe it. When the two are face to face, they were very surprised, but so no one would suspect, they pretended not to know each other. Mary doesn't beat around the bush and tells him she accepts his terms with one condition, but she needs to discuss it with Won Yu in private. He asks, "What's that condition?" Mary tells him to agree to be her husband for a day so she can claim the prize. Won Yu says no, but Mary knows he needs her help, because if he doesn't accept, Won Yu's company will lose a lot of money. Won Yu didn't want to disappoint his grandmother, so he agrees, as long as it's only for one day. They had to pick up the prize, Won Yu, one day over the weekend. He wanted it done quickly, just a signature, since getting caught could mean being reported for fraud. That's why he also makes an effort and acts as Mary's loving husband. But the chief executive officer wanted to take the prize away from them. So he told them they had to cooperate with the advertising campaign. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to get the prize. Won Yu didn't want to do it since his grandmother or someone from the company might recognize him. He pretends to have a contagious disease, so the executives let him wear a mask. After the ceremony, Won Yu uses the fake illness to leave. Before that, he receives the keys to his new house, but Mr. Beck tells him that he's not done yet. For the handover to be official, he must live with his husband for at least 3 months. That's why they have to meet again, and both of them must go see their new home. Their new home was luxurious, with celebrities and politicians as neighbors. Upon arriving at the luxurious house, Won Yu says he'll only visit occasionally because it's far from work. Mr. Beck tells him that he doesn't care as long as they live together and don't separate. Besides, he lives across the street, so he'll be watching them. Because of this, Won Yu gets very worried and tells Mary that he can't live there. She replies that she has nowhere to go, so she can't lose the house. Won Yu tells her that it's fine, but that he won't be part of that scam. However, when he leaves, he feels bad and calls her to apologize. But on the street, he ran into his aunt and his cousin. Also, at that moment, Mr. Beck shows up and asks him about his wife. Right behind him, Mary comes out and Won Yu signals her to stay away. She understands and hides in a doghouse. However, she left her cell phone behind, and Won Yu's aunt found it. Mary would rather lose her phone than be found, but when she gets a call, she has to come out to get it and pretends to be crazy, so the lady leaves quickly. The next day, the president had a routine checkup with the doctor who had known her since childhood. She takes the opportunity to tell her that she likes Won Yu. The president offers her help and says she would love for her to be her daughter-in-law. At the same time, at the company, we see that the accountant had discovered a fraud. Someone was moving a lot of money to a shell company in the United States. The vice director says it's serious, and, for now, he shouldn't tell anyone to prevent the culprit from escaping. For her part, Mary calls her friend to ask if she can let her live with her for a while. But since she was in the army, she couldn't help her. With no options, she decides to go to a hotel while she finds a place to live. The motel was full of couples doing their things, And since the walls were thin, you could hear all kinds of things. The next day, Mary delivers a design to a hospital. As she leaves, she meets the doctor, Won Yu's friend, recognizes her and invites her for coffee. But this was just an excuse to ask if she's interested in him. Mary says no and that she has nothing to worry about. Then she goes to Won Yu's company for her presentation. Since everything went well, they invite her to eat and drink. Since they'd be working together for a long time, they needed to get to know each other and get along. But at dinner, they start discussing marriage and how. A company had raffled off a house for newlywed couples. While searching for the winners, Mary and Won Yu did everything possible to avoid being found. In the end, Mary drinks too much and Won Yu has to take her home again. When he learns she was living in a motel, he becomes concerned. Then, when he takes her to her room, Mary had forgotten her key. So he asked the manager for help, but when he wanted to leave her alone, he sees that the manager was watching her. Strange, but in the end, he has to leave. When he reaches his car, he fears the worst and goes back. When he gets to Mary's room, he finds the man touching her foot. Because of this, he ends up hitting him. But it turns out it was all a misunderstanding. The man didn't have bad intentions, he just wanted to help Mary. Because of this, the manager ends up kicking them out. Mary was upset because she no longer had a place to stay. Won Yu apologizes to her and tells her she can sleep in the house he won, at least until she finds somewhere to live. Meanwhile, the vice president tells the accountant not to worry, assuring him they'll catch the thief soon. To help him feel calm, he offers him an energy drink. But the drink had a sleeping pill in it, so the accountant ends up falling asleep while driving and, unfortunately, loses his life. The next day, the construction company's chief executive officer warns Mr. B to take Mary's house away or he'll face the consequences. That's why the man wants to make a surprise visit and tells Mary that her husband must be present when it happens. She was very worried because she didn't want to ask Won Yu for that favor anymore. At the same time, the president finds out that the accountant had died under very suspicious circumstances, but since she was already older, the one who should go to offer condolences is the vice president, even though he was the one who ended the accountant's life. When night falls, Mary does everything in the dark, avoiding the light so the Lord won't discover her. But at night, the worst enemy of all appears. A mosquito starts attacking her, and Mary, trying to kill it, claps her hands twice. This turns on the lights, and not wanting to be discovered, she tries to switch them off, but accidentally activates all the lights in the smart house. Because of this, the man goes to her to give her a form. Mary takes advantage of this and asks him to help her with the lights. But Mr. B also notices there are only Mary's belongings, with nothing from her husband. He finds this suspicious and asks, "Why do you live alone?" Mary answers that her husband has been very busy, but she tells him that her husband will move in with her soon. Later, he asks Won Yu if she has any clothes she no longer uses. She says yes, but that won't be enough for the surprise visit. That's why, the next day, they decide to do a photo shoot as newlyweds. When he saw her dressed in white, Won Yu was delighted. So he took the chance to get a little too comfortable for the photos. But Miss Kim was in the same studio. When she sees Won Yu, she recognizes him and wants to greet him. To avoid getting caught, Won Yu warns Mary. Knowing it's over if they're discovered, she kisses him more passionately to prevent interruptions. When they're done, the two apologize and go to decorate Mary's house. They also use the chance to convince Mr. B they're a loving newlywed couple. The next day at the meeting, Miss Kim says she saw someone who looked a lot like Won Yu, but he was taking newlywed photos and kissing a woman who looked a lot like Mary. She says she must be mistaken and it's impossible it's her. Then Won Yu tells her not to worry and that the kisses they shared didn't mean anything to him. Mary says it didn't mean anything to her either, and that he's the one exaggerating it. At night, the vice president confesses to the president that the accountant was a gambling addict and blames him for several losses in the company. Unable to defend himself, the president believes him. But out of respect for his death, she asks not to report it. Later during dinner, Won Yu's aunt talks about the accountant's accident. Because of how he died, she can't help but compare it to her brother's death. Since Won Yu's father also died in a traffic accident, he feels bad and goes to his room to get some air. There, he remembers everything that happened that night. He walked a lot looking for help for his parents, but the only one who helped him was a taxi driver who was with his daughter. The little girl pitied him and gave him her favorite toys so he wouldn't feel alone. Before leaving, Wan Yu saw that the little girl who had barely met him was dead. He felt very sad for him, as he had lost both parents and had no one left to care for him. Wan Yu remembered that dinner very fondly since that girl was his first love. The next day, the doctor invites Wan Yu to dinner. He accepts, but tells her that he has an appointment before. He must pretend to be Mary's husband for the day to keep Mr. Beck from getting suspicious. Before his inspection, Wan Yu asks her about her relationship with her ex-husband. Mary tells him that since she was very hardworking, she paid for everything, paid part of his studies, supported him when he couldn't find a job, and even paid for the honeymoon they were going to take. After their wedding, Wan Yu admits she was naive and he took advantage of her. He then asks how she fell for Cucaracho. She says it was love at first sight since he saved her from drowning, and because he was so handsome. She couldn't help but fall in love. But now that they've broken up, she regrets it. She doesn't regret dating him, but she regrets giving so much love to someone who didn't deserve it. Wan Yu tells her that it's not a bad thing, that she'll find someone who values her for who she is. At the same time, Mr. Beck was having problems. His boss assaulted a man, and as always, he had to fix it. Because of this, they have to cancel the visit to Mary since they didn't have anything else to do. They start talking about work, and Wan Yu asks him to show her some designs. Mary was actually designing the company's new mascot, which would feature two traditional Korean children. The girl is named for the bakery, and the boy uses a pseudonym. Since Mary made it thinking of her first love, the boy she met many years ago at the police station. Due to everything that happened, Wan Yu forgot his dinner with the doctor, who was already waiting for him. So he won't feel bad, she says she has to work and can't go, then goes drinking to drown her sorrows. Mr. Beck arrives, and when she tries to speak to him, he says he doesn't talk to strangers. The doctor says they met hours ago, but Mr. Beck says he doesn't remember. She knows he's lying, so she takes it out on him and says Wan Yu ignores her. No matter how many signals she sends him, he offers her a drink and tells her to drink so she'll be quiet. The next day was the presentation of the company's new mascot. The president was happy with the design, but at the same time, Mary's mother, Mary, had gone to the city because she wanted to bring food to her in-laws. Mary was very scared because she still hadn't told her mother the truth. So she goes out to try to stop her, but Wan Yu stops her and tells her she can't leave without finishing her presentation. So he will go in her place to look for her mother, but unfortunately for him, she had already arrived with her mother-in-law. The lady tells him the whole truth and takes the opportunity to say that her daughter isn't good enough for her son. Mary's mother was very, very angry, but she held it all in and simply apologized because she didn't want her daughter to be a divorcee. But her apologies were useless. The lady threw her food at her and told her she didn't want to see her again. Luckily, at that moment, Wan Yu arrived and helped her with her things on the way. Wan Yu tells her that her hardworking daughter is essential to his company's progress. Because of this, her mother feels proud and talks about how special her daughter is. At the end of the meeting, Mary pretends not to know the truth and tells her daughter not to worry before leaving. She asks Wan Yu not to tell her daughter the truth since she must have her reasons for not telling her. But as Mary headed home, her ex-sister-in-law called to say her mother had caused a scene at her house. Because of this, Mary feels sad, believing her mother lost the most from the divorce. Wan Yu comforts her and tells her to talk to her. Because of the way she spoke about Mary, he's sure she'll understand. At night, she calls her mother and tells her everything. The lady tells her not to worry, that Cucaracho doesn't deserve her. She advises her to use this chance to succeed and prove he lost, since they were honest with each other. Mary seizes the chance to tell her she won a $5 million house. But since Cucaracho is traveling, he's committing fraud. Her mother tells her to endure for 3 months and avoid getting caught, even if it's wrong. After hanging up, her mother uses Cucaracho's photo for witchcraft, hoping karma gets him. Her spell worked immediately because Cucaracho finds a very suspicious message on his lover's phone. She lies to him and says she has to meet up with a friend and asks if they can see each other later. But he knew it wasn't true, so he decides to follow her. When he reaches the top floor and sees her with another man, Cucaracho's heart shatters from her betrayal. He now feels just like Mary did when he cheated on her. Meanwhile, Mary's mother, having forgotten her affection, is searching for her. He sees a picture of Mary when she was a child. That's how he finds out that she is his first love. That's why he wants to help her in every way he can, using any excuse to spend more time with her. Fate gave him the chance to reunite with his first love, so he wasn't going to waste it. Later, the cockroach returns to the country and calls Mary first to apologize and pretend nothing happened. She hangs up, wanting nothing to do with him. Then we see that Wanju's grandmother tells him he'd better find a good woman and get married before she dies. That way, she'll be at ease and able to rest in peace. The next day, we learn Mr. Beck will work with Wanju's company. When Wanju sees him, he fakes a stomach ache to avoid him. Despite his efforts to avoid him, they must eventually work together. But luckily for him, Mr. Beck acts as if they don't know each other and tells Wanju that it's not good to mix business with personal matters. Wanju is very happy when he hears this, causing Mr. Beck to become suspicious. Although luckily for them, Mary arrives just in time to pick up her mother's wallet, and thanks to this, they manage to save themselves once again, since Mr. Beck was onto them. Wanju tells Mary that from now on they should communicate more and suggests that they call each other 3 times a day to stay up to date on everything. This was just an excuse to talk to Mary longer. At the same time, the cockroach's mother pressures him to marry his lover as soon as possible, so that they can have the life they deserve. But what she didn't know was that the cockroach confronted his lover and asked her about the other man. She tells him the other man is her fiancé and the cockroach is her lover. Since she was from a wealthy family, her parents had arranged her engagement. The cockroach tells her he doesn't want to be her lover, so he asks her to choose. She tells him it's very easy. That's why he returned to the country, very sad. Now that his heart had been broken, he couldn't help but miss the woman who truly loved him. Mary, on her part, goes out to eat with her best friend. Since it was her day off, she couldn't leave her alone, but at that moment, Wanju also shows up. When she sees how handsome he is, Mary's friend alters her voice to sound more feminine. Suddenly, during their conversation, she brings up Mary's first love, an orphan boy with a beautiful nape. Even though she saw him only once, was it enough for Mary to fall in love with him? Wanju asks her if it's true, and Mary answers yes, that boy is exactly her type. This makes Wanju happy because he also fell in love with her, even though he saw her only once at night. We see that Wanju and the doctor have a date that the president had arranged so they could get closer. The doctor got tired of giving him hints, so she wanted to confess her feelings that day, but Wanju doesn't pay attention to her. Because of this, the doctor gets discouraged and doesn't say anything anymore. He, on the other hand, takes the opportunity to tell her that he reunited with his first love. She gets nervous and asks him why he didn't look for her earlier if he was so in love. He says he did. He found her house when he was in high school, but when he got to her door, he heard Mary's mother mention that the death of her father was the fault of the boy he saved, since supposedly he died because he went to give a statement at the police station. Because of this, Wanju felt guilty and didn't have the courage to ring the doorbell. The doctor tells him that he's right and that Mary probably blames him for her father's death. She also tells him that what he feels is probably not love, but guilt. That's why she suggests not telling Mary the truth. Meanwhile, the chief executive officer reminds Mr. Beck he'll never be like him, no matter how hard he tries. He reminds Mr. Beck that everything he has is thanks to him and his family. Mr. Beck, knowing it's true, just lowers his head and thanks him. Days later, it was the anniversary of Wanju's parents' death. Like every year, his whole family paid their respects, but his aunt and cousin thought it was a waste of time. Also, we found out that his parents had died on his birthday. Because of this, after the accident, Wanju never received any birthday wishes or gifts again. Also, when he was a child, he blamed himself for his parents' death. Because he threw a tantrum, his father turned and saw the truck coming. This caused everyone to blame him, even his own grandfather, who sent him abroad so he wouldn't have to be near him. Mary, for her part, didn't know that Wanju's parents had died that day. Since it was his birthday, she congratulates him and says she'll cook for him to thank him for all his help. Wanju. He gets very happy because after many years, someone congratulated him again. When he arrives to eat, Mary has prepared a feast, but the soup is very salty, so she asks Wanju not to eat it. He tells her he hasn't had seaweed soup since childhood, so he doesn't mind the saltiness. When he finishes, he tells her why his family doesn't celebrate his birthday, because it was a very sad day. Every year, he just hopes it passes as quickly as possible. Mary tells him that day can be skipped on the calendar and that he still has more than 300 days left to celebrate his birthday. After they finish eating, a double rainbow appears. Mary excitedly tells him to make a wish. She wishes for success and to pay off her debt. Wanju wished for her to be part of his life, but since he felt embarrassed, he didn't want to tell Mary. She wanted him to tell her, so she chases after him to insist, but suddenly she trips and falls into his arms. Right underneath them was the cockroach. He had taken his cat to an expensive veterinarian. When Mary sees him, she quickly hides to avoid being recognized. He doubts it's her and leaves. Mary wonders what she'll do if discovered. Wanju says it's best to get ahead and make him an ally, so there's no need to lie and they can share the money. Mary tells her that she knows him very well and she's sure he'll blackmail her to ask for more money. And besides, after what he did, she'd rather lose the house than work with him. The next day, we see the doctor at the same club as Mr. Beck. That day, a lady runs too much and has a heart attack. The doctor tries to revive her, but while she's in a bad position, some guys come and take pictures. Mr. Beck sees her, tells her to cover up, then asks the guys to delete the pictures after helping her. One guy reminds him of himself, so he advises taking advantage of his rich friend. But will he regret it later? Later, Cucaracho looks for Mary. Since she didn't want to raise suspicion, she talks to him. Cucaracho tells her that he couldn't get her out of his head during his whole trip. This upset his lover, so she made him choose. Unable to move on, he chose Mary, but in reality, he returned because his lover left him. Mary tells him that he can't use the same trick anymore. He can't ruin everything and then apologize as if nothing happened. The cockroach, unsure of what to do, leaves but tells her he won't give up easily. Later, we see that the bakery had sent many orders to its very important person customers, but they had included a poem by a Buddhist monk that recently caused an uproar. If their customers received that poem, they might feel offended. So Mary suggests collecting the packages and removing the poem. In the afternoon, El Cucaracho calls Mary, but she doesn't answer. His sister tells him to stop begging because they insulted his mother. They won't apologize to her. El Cucaracho gets furious and says that if Mary doesn't forgive him, it will be their fault. He then calls Mary's assistant to find out where she is. He arrives at the parking lot and sees her leaving with Wenyu, which makes him jealous and leads him to follow them. That's how he arrives at the luxury house where Mary used to live. She, for her part, asks Wenyu to help her with some things, and he gladly agrees. As they spent more time together, both of them felt more comfortable, so they agreed to have lunch the next day after Wenyu leaves. El Cucaracho patiently waits for Mary to leave her house. When he confronts her, she tells him that it's not what it looks like, that she's actually working for the owner of the house because she has nowhere to live. El Cucaracho tells her that he doesn't believe her, that it's very strange for a man to help a woman without ulterior motives. Mary answers him that that's none of his business and that the only unfaithful one is him. This makes El Cucaracho even angrier, so he forcefully breaks into Mary's house to find proof she cheated on him with another man. Mary tells him that even if that were true, it's none of his business. They're divorced. The cockroach ignores her and tells her that she should have at least waited a year before dating someone else. Mary doesn't know how to get him out of her house, and she can't call the police because they're still legally married. Also, she doesn't want him to find out that she won the house in a raffle, to avoid him seeing the photo of her with Wenyu. She turns off the lights, causing the cockroach to fall and suffer multiple fractures. The doctor tells her that she has to take care of him because those fractures could make him worse. He, like the cockroach's mother, went on a trip with no one else to help. Mary had to look after him all night. The next day, the accountant's wife brings documents proving fraud in the company. She tells the president that her husband died because he discovered that and not because he was a gambling addict. The vice president, for his part, was the one behind all of this. He had another family in the United States. He even had a son. And he was diverting all that money to take over the company before the next successor could take his place. Back to Mary, she was taking care of the cockroach, even though she didn't want to. He always looks for excuses to get her to forgive him. But Mary says none of his tricks will work after everything that happened. Did she forget she had a date with Wenyu? She calls him to apologize and tells him that a friend of hers had an accident, and that's why she has to take care of him. Since it's her friend's workplace, does Wenyu visit her at the hospital? That's how he finds Mary, who was with her ex, and that makes him feel bad, but to get it over with quickly, he decides to help her and takes Cucaracho to her room. Then, the two of them have a conversation. Mary asks him if he's angry. Wenyu answers that he's not, but he doesn't think it's right for her to lie to him. Mary tells him that she doesn't understand. Before, it didn't matter to him. Wenyu now says it does because he likes her and doesn't want to see her with another man. When she hears this, Mary doesn't know what to say, so she asks him why he likes her. He says there's no reason, he just likes her. Mary liked him too. Wenyu, so he quickly starts asking her if she has any savings or a place to live. Wenyu thinks she's asking all that because she suspects he wants to take her house. He tells her that he earns quite well and that he's not asking her to marry him or anything like that. Due to the misunderstanding, Wenyu tells her to forget what he said and suggests they remain as they are. Then they visit Cucaracho. He asks about her relationship with his wife. Mary explains they're divorced and it's not his concern. Then she gets a call from work. So Wenyu tells her she can leave without a problem, because he'll stay to take care of Cucaracho. He wasn't happy at all with that idea, but he couldn't complain because he needed someone to take care of him. Cucaracho tells him not to bother trying to take Mary since they've been together over 5 years. Wenyu responds that if that were true, he wouldn't have cheated on her. Cucaracho assures him it was a one-time incident and won't happen again. Mary, for her part, was very moved by what Wenyu had told her. So, before going to sleep, she thanks him and promises to treat him better the next day. Cucaracho was stinky because he hadn't bathed in more than 2 days, so Wenyu has to clean him. Later, his mother and sister arrive. Seeing them, Cucaracho cries and blames that guy for everything. When she learns everything, his mother tells him to stop searching for Mary and focus on his lover. But Wenyu tells her the truth, that she was already engaged and that he was actually the lover. Now that he was deceived too, he feels bad and wants Mary back. When she finds out about this, his sister calls Mary, but her mother, instead of apologizing, tells her not to go near her son. Later, Wenyu picks up Mary and says he'll take her home from now on because he wants to treat her better. He also gives her flowers because it was like their first date. The doctor and Mr. Beck are having lunch, which she arranged to tell him she has researched him and found he is very intelligent and capable. She doesn't get why he lets his boss mistreat him. Mr. Beck says she can't understand because she was born into a good family. On the other hand, he had to build everything he has. Then we see how Wenyu had gathered all his old records. He saved money since childhood to show Mary she didn't need to worry about his finances. She starts reading his journals and discovers that the name Miso appeared frequently in his notes. That was the pseudonym of his first love. At the same time, the doctor had drunk too much. She started to feel very comfortable with Mr. Beck, so she told him that she liked a guy. Mr. Beck tells her that he probably never will because he must see her as a sister and not as a woman. The doctor feels bad and asks him if she's pretty, and Mr. Beck answers that she's not that bad. But that doesn't help when a man sees you as a sister. Disappointed. She wants to go home, but since there wasn't a taxi, she gets into Mr. Beck's car. For his part, Wenyu doesn't want to go home, so he cancels all the taxis. The next day, they take advantage of the fact that Wenyu had slept at home to go have breakfast. But Mr. Beck had his own problems, so he leaves quickly. The doctor had slept at his house and upon waking recalled the commotion he caused. Because of this, he feels very embarrassed and can't look Mr. Beck in the face. For his part, Mr. Beck leaves him new clothes and some soup for the hangover. Mary is walking with Wenyu when they suddenly meet a famous athlete. She was his fan and asks him for an autograph, but Wenyu felt jealous, so he gets the autograph instead. Also, when Mary asks for a photo, Wenyu takes a bad one so she won't be thinking about other men. While they're heading home, they run into the doctor. Because of this, Wenyu tells her the whole truth. She was very worried, since if they get caught, they'll be accused of fraud and that could harm her company. Wenyu assures her it will be over soon and asks her to keep the secret. In the afternoon, the doctor contacts Mary and tells her not to harm Wenyu, since if they get caught, he would be the most affected. She also takes the opportunity to tell her the whole truth, saying that he is the heir to the company and that he is the boy she helped many years ago. That's why he has been helping her all this time, because he felt indebted to her. Not because he likes her or anything like that. This makes Mary feel really bad, so she decides to go back to her hometown to visit her mother. But after saying all this, the doctor feels bad, so she tells him everything, gets upset with her, and quickly goes to look for Mary. When she arrives in her hometown, they both decide to clear things up once and for all. She asks if he still has the stuffed animal she gave him, And he says yes, he's kept it with great affection all these years. He asks if she blames him for her father's death. Mary says no, no one is to blame. She adds he doesn't owe her or her family anything. Wenyu tells her that he didn't help her out of obligation. That's why he really likes her and wants to be with her, no matter what happens. Then they share their first kiss. Later, Wenyu tells her he searched for her again in high school, but before ringing the doorbell, he heard her mother say that he was to blame for his father's death. So he chose to leave. Meili tells him he should have listened to her, since her mother only said that because she was hurt. She didn't really blame him. She said that no one is at fault in an accident. Then she tells him not to feel bad because even though her father died, she grew up happy since when he was alive, he loved her very much. Wenyu tells her that from now on, he will love her very much too. Since it was already very late, Wenyu couldn't go back home, so he stays at Mary's house. Her mother was happy because she liked her new suitor. Later, Wenyu calls Mary. She thought he wanted to say goodnight to her, but in reality, he just wanted her to remove an insect from his room. Mary calls him a crybaby and says she'll handle all insects for him from now on. Suddenly, her mother arrives. Because of this, they get into bed to avoid being discovered. After she leaves, they spend the night hugging. The next day, Mary's mother prepares a lot of food to spoil Wenyu. She also takes the opportunity to tell her that she got married because of her, since she was the one who set that condition to lend her the money. So she asks her not to judge her, and that's why Mary tells her not to say that. They're not getting married, but her mother insists they should because she saw them hugging all night. Then they visit Mary's father's grave. Wenyu wanted to thank her for helping him, and thanks to her help, he was able to meet his first love. Then they go to the beach. Mary tells him that she wants to do things right, even if it's harder. That's why she wants to tell Mr. Beck the truth, so they don't have to keep lying. That way, maybe they'll forgive them and forget everything. Wenyu tells her that it's okay and that he'll support her in everything he can. When they return to the city, Wenyu wanted to remodel his mother-in-law's kitchen. But at the store was the cockroach's mother. When she saw her with her new boyfriend, they think she's a goody two-shoes who didn't even wait a year to get over her son. When she tells the cockroach, he gets jealous and wants to learn more about the guy. That's how he finds out that he's the head of the marketing department at one of the most important bakeries in the country. That's why he decides to destroy him, so he won't be with Mary. For his part, the vice president went to the United States to be with his other family. Here we find out that his other wife was aware of his deception and was also helping him to divert a lot of money from the bakery. The next day, Wenyu keeps messaging Mary about her beauty. She, although she feels flattered, tells him that they should be more professional, at least while they're working. In the afternoon, El Cucaracho wrote a letter stating that Wenyu is guilty of both fraud and adultery, so he plans to go to the company and deliver it to the president in person. But, unfortunately for him, the guards end up kicking him out and tell him that he can't see the president without an appointment. Because he was stubborn, he re-enters through the parking lot where he hears people discussing Wenyu as the company's next successor, like everyone else. This way, he finds out that he wasn't just another employee, but the heir to a big company. When he confirms the information, he feels really bad because his letter is now useless. His rival is not only more handsome, but also richer and from a better family. Defeated, he sings heartbreak songs. The next day, Presidenta invites the marketing team to her house for a meal and takes the chance to praise their good work. Then she tells them that one of her principles is not to lie or deceive, which is why she despises anyone who lies, especially if it's for their own benefit. This makes Merrick feel really bad, and he thinks she would never like him if she found out what he did. To top it off, he finds out that Presidenta wanted to marry her grandson to the doctor. In the afternoon, Cucaracho discovers he never filed his divorce papers, so they're technically still married. By chance, he found out they both won a $5 million house. Furious, he goes to Merrick's house. She tells him to leave or she'll call the police. Cucaracho says to go ahead, so he can report her for fraud. When he hears this, Merrick knows she's been caught, but now she doesn't care, so she tells him to go ahead. She was planning to do it anyway. Since his threat doesn't work, he tells her that she must stay away from Wanju or else he'll report him. And since he's the heir to a big corporation, he can't have any kind of scandal. When he hears this, Merrick tells him not to do it because he accepts his conditions. At the same time, the president tells Wanju that someone has been embezzling money from the company, So she orders him to investigate it in secret. The next day, Wanju tries to talk to Merrick, but she doesn't respond, so he assumes she's angry. By chance, he overhears his cousin, an expert in women, teaching how to apologize. He writes it all down and prepares to go to Merrick. For his part, Wanju's aunt calls her husband. He acts like the good guy, as always, but this time his lover was fed up. She tells him that, as the soon-to-be president, he must divorce his wife. Wanju promises to do it, but asks her not to pressure him. Later, his son arrives along with Merrick's sister, who worked for the lady. At the same time, Wanju followed in his cousin's footsteps, but Merrick was very worried. She didn't want the cockroach to cause him trouble, so she tells him they should stop seeing each other. After all, they are from different worlds. Wanju didn't want to do it, and neither did Merrick, but she couldn't do anything else to protect him. The next day, a guard tells Wanju the cockroach caused trouble at the company. Because of this, he understands that they've already been discovered, and that's probably why she had distanced herself from him. Meanwhile, the cockroach was blackmailing. He tells Merrick they can be together now that she's not with Wanju, but Merrick makes it clear she no longer has feelings for him, and they'll never be together again. The cockroach does the same thing as always. He kneels down and begs for forgiveness, but Merrick tells him that his tricks don't work anymore. She tells him she won't be blackmailed anymore and will tell Mr. Beck everything. The cockroach gets scared and tells her she can't do that because the prize belongs to him too. She says no, that she won it on her own, and that's why she can do whatever she wants. This makes the cockroach even angrier. He even wants to hit her, but luckily he doesn't. At that moment, Wanju arrives and gives him what he deserves. He tells him that if he wants to threaten someone, he should do it directly. Since the cockroach can't beat him, he just leaves. Afterward, Wanju tells Merrick she shouldn't have faced this alone and should have told him so they could handle it together. The next day, there was an awards ceremony at the company. Wanju wanted to take advantage of that special event to officially introduce her to her grandmother, but Merrick was very nervous and her grandmother was very busy. So he tells her to talk. During the meeting, we learned Mr. Beck would also attend, and if he showed up, he'd discover Wanju is the president's grandson. So Wanju and Merrick try to leave, but Mr. Beck catches Merrick talking to the president. And that's how he found out she wasn't Wanju's wife. Before they could be reported for fraud, the doctor arrives and says she has a video of them bribing the mayor. That was more serious than the house fraud, so they agree not to say anything. Because of that, Wanju and Merrick are too scared to keep worrying. So Merrick decides that the best thing to do is to tell the truth. Will they feel more at ease? Suddenly, her sister arrives at her house, having quit her job in the United States to visit her new home. When she sees Wanju, she tells her sister she has good taste. As her sister arrives, Wanju leaves, but Merrick asks her to say goodbye first. At the same time, the vice president begins his plan to take control of the company, now that he would be the owner. There was no need to keep pretending anymore. That's why he confesses everything to the president. He stole the money and killed the accountant. The president was terrified because she never thought he was capable of that. Because of all this, she starts having an attack, but the vice president switches her pills so she can't recover. Hours later, we found out that their plans had failed because the president managed to survive, although she was in critical condition. Also, due to her age, it was very difficult for her to wake up. That's why the next day, without the president, audits for embezzlement begin, and this causes people to withdraw their support from the company. Also, their investors begin demanding money, prompting Wenyu to investigate further as his grandmother advised. When she finds out, Mary goes with him to support him and tells him that she suspects her uncle. But since she doesn't have solid evidence, she can't report him. At the same time, the vice president's mistress had arrived in the country. She would demand debt payments, and since they couldn't pay, force them to sell the company off piece by piece. That way, the vice president would take control with the very money he had stolen. The next day, the assistant manager tells her team to update their resumes, as she's sure layoffs are coming. This makes Wenyu feel bad because he feels that the company has a responsibility to all its employees. At night, they visit Mary to reveal he identified the woman responsible. The photo shows his brother's former boss. When they ask her, she says that the woman has another name and that the vice president is her husband, and they have a son together. This indicates that the one behind all of this was the vice president. But even with all this information, they didn't have solid evidence. If they report him now, he'd just be accused of adultery. So they pretend not to know and wait for their uncle's next move. The next day, the investor demands her money, saying she knows their finances but will give them more time since she's a good person. So they have to sell some of their assets and lay off employees in order to pay her. Wenyu is against it because he wants to preserve his grandmother's legacy. But the vice president tells him not to worry, that they literally have no other choice. This further confirms his suspicions. He was the mastermind behind this whole plot. Because of this, Mary suggests setting a trap for him to expose him. That's why they use his grandmother as bait. His cousin helps him because he knew that his father had another family, but he didn't know that he was behind all of this. To clear his doubts, he pretends the grandmother woke up. His father then calls his lover and asks her to take care of the grandmother. The woman, dressed as a nurse, tries to kill the president, but Wenyu and the police are already there and catch her red-handed. Mary says that although they didn't catch his uncle, they're closer to saving his grandmother's company. Will they find the fraud? Public opinion sides with the company, but that doesn't change the fact that they owed a lot of money. Also, there was no evidence on the woman's phone that she had worked with the vice president, so technically, he's still innocent. Because of this, Wenyu decides to confront his uncle. He tells him that he already knows everything and that when he finds evidence, he'll make him pay for everything. He acts like a victim, claiming the woman manipulated him and even denies having a son with her. Wenyu acts like she believes him, but it's a trap. She recorded their talk to reveal him to his lover. His cousin gives him evidence he collected over the years so he could eventually tell his mother about the cheating. The next day, Wenyu visits the woman. She says she won't speak up, but Wenyu urges her to do it for her son, if not for herself. He shows her the recording and tells her that now that she's in prison, his uncle will forget about her and her son. Because of this, the woman confesses everything and tells him that she never fully trusted her lover. That's why she also collected evidence of all his crimes, just in case something happened to her. The evidence was about the murder of Wenyu's parents. Apparently, Wenyu's father had discovered that his brother-in-law was cheating on his sister. That's why he told him to stay away from the family. Wanting the company for himself, he chose to kill them. So, it was never Wenyu's fault, but his uncle's. When he arrives, he tells his uncle he can't pretend anymore. Like his father learned 20 years ago, he has now discovered it too. His uncle laughs, telling him he has no evidence to stop him and that the crime is already expired, so they can't blame him. Wenyu wanted to hit him, but he holds back because he already has everything planned. He called the police after his lover betrayed him, and he had evidence of his crimes in his pocket. Wenyu's uncle says that crime has already expired, but with the evidence his cousin gave him, they could reopen the case since he had bribed the prosecutor to close it before. Later, the vice president is put on trial with all the evidence they had gathered. The judge sentences him to death because he not only stole money, but also killed people and didn't feel the slightest bit of remorse. Wenyu's aunt felt guilty and blamed herself for everything that was happening, since she was the one who insisted on marrying that man. The next day, Wenyu goes to his parents to tell them that they finally received justice. He also introduces his girlfriend, Mary, assuring them she will give their son plenty of love and they don't need to worry. For his part, Mr. Beck was also tired of everything. When Mary and Wenyu went to tell him the truth, he had already resigned himself. He invites them in, easing their burden. Although Mary was now homeless, she felt more at ease. Wenyu suggests living together, but Mary says it's too soon. Meanwhile, Cucaracho remains determined to destroy Wenyu. He issues a statement promising to reveal a dark secret about the bakery's heir. Meanwhile, the grandmother finally wakes up. The whole family was very happy. Wenyu's aunt takes the opportunity and asks him to please forgive her. She blamed him for her brother's death, but later learned her husband was responsible and deeply regretted it. He reassures her, saying he can't be upset with the small family he has left. For their part, the marketing team would have a meeting that Wenyu and Mary attended. He wanted to share their relationship, but Mary insists it's too soon and wants to tell her assistant first. After Truth or Dare, Mary gets very drunk. Wenyu feels bad thinking she wanted to hide him, but Mary assures him that's not true. She says he's so handsome she can't just show him off. Their friends already knew they were dating and just made her drink to see how long she could keep lying. A few days later, Wenyu's cousin goes to visit his father. He tries to manipulate his son, but his son insists he's not naive. Before leaving, he asks his father to regret his actions, not for him, but for his mother, who loved him more than anyone else. Then he invites his mother to eat. For his part, Mr. Beg had reported the acts of corruption, and the owner of the company was beating his son. Even though it was his fault, he tells Mr. Beck he should once again pay for his son's mistakes. As a result, he visits the orphanage to say goodbye to the woman who raised him, explaining he'll be gone for a long time and won't be able to visit as often. She tells him not to worry and to be very careful. The doctor was also at the orphanage. After they run into each other, she asks him to take her out to eat. He brings her to a spot he frequented in his youth, where he first met his boss's kids. He stole a ring, but when he got caught, he blamed Mr. Lee. Since he was an orphan, no one believed he was innocent, so he wouldn't say anything. His boss's father took him home and since then paid him to take his exams, do his homework, and fix his son's life. In general, because they practically changed his life, Mr. Big felt indebted and thought it was normal for them to treat him that way. But the doctor made him see that after everything he endured, he had already paid his debt and didn't owe them anything at all. The next day was supposedly Cucaracho's press conference to reveal the big fraud. But because the man had confessed the whole truth, all the blame fell on the chief executive officer. That's why he was very worried. This time, he would face the consequences of his actions. He sends his assistant to stop the conference and sue Cucaracho. He also wanted to give the house to Mary right away, so he'd have one less crime. But Mr. Beck had already returned the house, and Mary no longer wanted it after everything that had happened. Cucaracho ends up paying the price when the company sues him for a large sum, even though he no longer had a job. When she sees him cry, Mary can't help but feel bad, even though he was a Cucaracho at some point. They were in love, and out of respect for that, she asks him to stop interfering and suggests they remember the best parts of their relationship to end things on good terms. After that, Mary files for divorce, and now she is legally divorced. The man says goodbye to the doctor, telling her that she gave him the courage to leave that family. Also, since he trusts her, he will leave her in charge of his turtles. A few days later, Wanju's grandmother asks to meet Mary. Since things were getting serious now, everyone started treating her better because she was going to become the president's girlfriend. But things are never that simple, especially in romance dramas. The mother of Cucaracho found out that Mary's new boyfriend is the heir to one of the best bakeries in the country. Out of jealousy, she arrived at the president's house before Mary and told her the whole truth, although she obviously exaggerated the story a bit. Because of this, Wanju's grandmother doesn't want to see Mary anymore. For his part, the cockroach was drowning his sorrows, but his sister called him and told him what they had done. Because of this, he tells them that he never wants to see them again. When Mary learns about it, she's very sad and tells her mother the truth when she calls. This time, her mother gets tired of it, so she goes to look for the witch, her in-law, and grabs her by the hair. When her daughter tries to help her, Mary's sister jumps in and also grabs her by the hair. Sometime later, Mary and Wanju go out to eat. Suddenly, Mary hears Wanju asking her grandmother to reconsider her decision. She thinks that she doesn't approve of her, so she feels very sad and walks home alone. But the reality was different. Wanju's cousin had quit the company to focus on video games, and now the only heir was Wanju. That's why she asked her grandmother to reconsider her decision. He didn't feel ready to take on so much responsibility, but his grandmother wanted her grandson to run her company. When he tells Mary, she feels relieved. Wanju takes the opportunity and asks her to be his wife. Mary freezes for a moment, but then she says yes. The best part is she didn't have to buy the ring this time. She goes to meet Wanju's grandmother, and this time she explains everything that happened. The grandmother confesses that she already investigated her and knows that her story is true. She had sent her daughter and grandson to Mary's village to meet her mother and confirm the facts. That's how they realized she came from a good family and wasn't just after their money. With all this, her grandmother approves of their marriage, but Wanju tells her they should wait a little because she needs time to adjust to her new position. Her grandmother tells her yes, that she can live a couple more years just to see her get married. After a year, we see that Mr. Bike went to prison, but he would be released soon. And during all this time, he had been exchanging letters with the doctor, and that's how they started dating. Wanju and Mary were finally getting married. With her cousin no longer competing with Wanju, they got along better. Mary's sister went viral on TikTok, and now she and their mother run the business. So, did everyone get a happy ending in the series? It doesn't seem so, does it? But I'm sure even Cucaracho found love, and that's how this story ends. Thank you very much for watching the video until the end. I hope you enjoyed the summary. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos. See you next story.